Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning and joining the session. I'll be delivering the talk, A Design Thinker Cements His Place in a Tech Company, over the next kind of 40 minutes. It might not last 40 minutes, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions or kind of asks that you have at the end. So yeah, I'm Nate Sterling. I'm the design lead at Grid Smarter Cities. And I'm here today to talk to you really about one project, the Freight Traffic Control project. But I'm just start off by taking you through the structure of the talk. So I'm going to give you a little bit about me and my background. So sorry if you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard the same poor jokes. I'm then going to describe a little bit about design thinking and what I think its value is, tell you a little bit about the company Grid, tell you a bit, and then we're going to dive into the project. And we're going to look specifically at the role designers play within the product development process of this particular project. Then we'll kind of demonstrate some of the other stuff we've been doing at Design at Grid. And then we'll have a chat about what's next, and I'll kind of let you into what we plan on doing next. So yeah, but before we start, I think I always like to address one of the reasons I like to speak at conference, and that's because as designers, how many times have we seen the perfect model? How many times have we seen this perfect diagram? And I think actually that does a disservice to our practice. And what's really useful is when practitioners like myself and like Jason earlier this morning, they share the lessons learned, they share the messy bits in between. And Alexis Lloyd is a fantastic kind of design researcher, designer, and she summed it up perfectly with this tweet. But before we get into what I've been doing, I'm going to go all the way back to where kind of my journey started. I went to Northumbria University to study industrial design. I thought I was going to be designing shoes, you know, sportswear for Nike, Adidas, and Jordan, and got pretty close to doing that. But the reality was, I leaned towards people. I leaned towards service design. I leaned towards really getting to grips with understanding a challenge, a problem, an opportunity, and then unpicking the different pieces. Here is an example of a project I did with the NHS around dementia, around palliative care for people living with dementia, where we looked at what kind of service innovations and changes we could make. And on the right is my final university project, which was around connecting care homes, connecting community gardens and primary schools in a holistic 12-month service, all centered around herb horticulture. So from my very early experience in design, I kind of really understood what I thought design was valuable for. And that was really around, you know, engaging with people, taking them on the journey. So yeah, service designer, not a footwear designer or product designer as I kind of first anticipated. And I was still relatively new to service design when I kind of transitioned to it. So I went and did a master's, the multidisciplinary design innovation masters at Northumbria. If anybody is looking for kind of a great way to understand design and a broader context of design in business, please do take a look at that course. I'm a proud alumnus. But what this course allowed me to do was really understand service design in context, to start applying it to a range of businesses, which then led me to really begin to kind of explore the question, what is design useful for? So when I finished the master's, I became an academic, really focused on the creative sector, working as part of the Creative Fuse program, and looking at innovation capacity in SMEs. And no, sorry people, you know, design is not just pretty pictures. And actually, Envision, amazing company, I'm sure some of you use their platform, have come across them. They produced this report not too long ago around the new design frontier. And what this really speaks to is the maturity of design in business. As you know, some of my colleagues who are in virtual attendance like to wind me up about, you know, yes, design does make things look good as in part of its role, but actually design can be much more valuable. Design can act, designers can act as connectors. So in workshops and facilitating environments, but actually within the business, you know, can you turn the environment you have into a more workshop-like environment? And what are the benefits of that? Designers as architects, so looking to replicate and scale solutions. Probably my favorite, designer as scientists, you know, as a researcher, We like to go out there and investigate an issue, create hypotheses and experiments around it, and go and test it. So why is design important? I'm sure many of you work in industries and sectors and areas on projects that are really quite complex. They'll have a lot of dependencies. They'll have a lot of interaction between politics and economics. Other factors, other socioeconomic factors, legal factors. The problems and challenges we're trying to solve in the current world are quite, often described as wicked. They're really hard to get to grips with. Well, isn't it good news that designers have developed our own practices and ways of dealing with these open, complex network problems? And one of those is design thinking. Now, I'm sure if you have any kind of background in design thinking, you will have come across this model. It is the Stanford design thinking model. It outlines 5 key phases or stages of activity within a design project. So you've got empathize, learn about the audience, get to grips with the context and the situation you're designing for. Define what are the key questions we're really trying to answer, what are the key challenges we're trying to resolve. Ideate, it's kind of in the word, come up with ideas. What solutions ideas do we have around solutions in response to the challenge, in response to the kind of work we've done empathizing with the context, the users, the people who are ultimately a consequence of the problem or challenge you've identified. Prototype, it's the fun bit, build stuff. Build quick and dirty examples, sketch examples that you can get in front of people to then test, which is where you gain your feedback and can really build on the concepts and ideas around the solutions that you've got. But actually, I think one thing that really struck me when I was certainly studying design innovation and design thinking practice was Keith Dorst is a fantastic author. I recommend his book around, it's called Frames. It's about creating new ways of creating value through design. And what he means by a frame is that by investigating a problem, you begin to really understand what makes it difficult. The tensions and the paradoxes which make it hard to solve. You really, map and understand the context. As I said, that could be both a very physical and literal context of, who are the users, where are they using the app, what are they using it for, versus a more kind of abstract, what are the political factors, what are the economic factors. Although a bit more abstract, they have very real consequence. So it's really important you consider that. Identifying themes and phrasing these different points of view as frames on the problem. So one of the problems I think a lot of organizations face is they try and tackle a problem that's too huge. They will throw everything at it, almost like flicking a paintbrush at the wall and seeing what sticks. Whereas actually, if you do the kind of frame creation in the initial stages, it makes that pursuit of the solution much more focused. And a big thing around design thinking, design innovation practice, we acknowledge the difficulty and the complexity of the challenge, but rather than look at it as a thing that's going to stop us, it's a stimulus and a creative stimulus. How can we respond to this complexity, to this challenge in a really positive way? And I did kind of say design, isn't just about pretty pictures, but the pictures and the visualizing of sometimes abstract elements is where design can be really useful. This quote here, I think really sums up quite nicely what design thinking can help businesses with. It can help align their strategy with their vision, but more explicitly, it can visualize their strategy. It can give people a sense of what they're trying to achieve and how they might achieve it. So Grid, a little bit about Grid. We're a Northeast tech company. We're based currently in Newcastle. We work here, there, and everywhere. And obviously, with the elephant in the room, COVID-19, we are now support remote working and managing to work in that way. But fundamentally, at Grid, we want to create digital products that help improve the lives of those living in cities. We want them to make it more engaging, and when they're living and working and socializing, more attractive than ever before. And we'd like to do this through our suite of digital products, as I mentioned. Now, it's interesting because when I first got into tech and working at Grid, very much thought it was, really exciting opportunity, really exciting company, really interesting things you want to do. And one thing I quickly realized is actually it's some of the most boring problems that are, we need to solve. And that's where kind of Curb, which is Grid's flagship product and kind of what has led us to build out a series of an alpha application, which I'll get into shortly, is all around solving, an age-old problem. And that is, the curb space we have in cities and in high-density urban environments is limited. At the minute, it's currently, a free-for-all. How can we use digital tools, also with working with local authorities and the landowners, to create what a temporary dispensation of a road restriction? So what this basically means is, if you have a double yellow line, you can work with the landowner, the council, the local authority, or if it's private land, to work on dispensing that restriction for a short period of time. It might be 20 minutes to allow a certain type of vehicle to load and unload on that curb space. It could be servicing the businesses, could be servicing residents, etc. And this is, it's funny because I always kind of complain about linear processes in the design kind of thinking and design world. And we all know as practitioners, in most things, it's not a straight start to finish. However, one of the first things I did when I joined Grid was work with the other heads of development, of product, operations, commercial, to try and articulate what our product development process is. And largely this was an internal tool, but it has become really useful in describing where we are to external people as well. So as you can see, there's almost like a membrane on the left where we have all these loose ideas bounding around. And at Grid, we have plenty of them. Our CEO is full of ideas, full of energy around creating solutions for the kind of problems we want. But what's really important is understanding how we take those ideas into a process to flesh them out. And that's where we kind of go into the explore phase, prototype, research, define, alpha, beta, and grow. And really what this process is around is two things. Mitigating the risk on the product concept as we progress through the phases. And we do that really by discovery and understanding the context we're playing in, by responding to the user's feedback and engagement with them. And this is really what I'm here today to talk to you is around the explore phase, around the prototype and research phase, the define phase, and alpha. As that's where we kind of got up to with the project. So about the project, Grid we were accepted onto an Innovate UK part-funded program to develop a product for Croydon in particular, about how they can help better manage vehicles on the approach to construction sites. As you can see in this picture, construction vehicles are often caught in a lot of traffic once they reach an urban, high density urban environment. And this can result in some negative behaviors, which I'll get into in a moment. And what we're really trying to do as well is help the construction industry. I'm not sure how many of you have experience with the construction industry, but I was at a conference a few years ago and it was deemed one of the least likely to adopt new innovations, whether that's tech, product, service. So going into this project, we kind of were well aware of some of the challenges we'd face in terms of adoption and likelihood to innovate. During this project is a consortium project. So as Grid, we're leading it with Croydon and Electric Blue. They are a provider of, electric vehicles, electric charging kind of expert, because there is part of the project which is looking at feasibility of using electric vehicles. We worked with A2H, who is a logistics industry kind of expert. We relied heavily on Glenn's Black Book in the research in terms of getting contacts in the room. We had White Willow, who is a telematics expert. So if we're going to understand the behavior in the vehicles, he's going to help us figure that out. Sensat, they're a drone mapping program. So we got some really cool visualizations of the site and the areas we're going to be working with. And yeah, of course, Croydon were operating within their local authority. And, you know, they did a great job of helping us recruit a construction site for this. So as I said, in high density urban environments, this is how the state of play is currently for construction vehicles. They kind of turn up from their depot kind of when they want, with no real guarantee of being able to access the site. And what this results in is obviously a circling behavior. This increases, you know, the time they're behind the wheel, time idling. So it has negative impact on kind of, you know, the environment and air quality, but also it increases the risk of road traffic collisions and road traffic incidents. So the very early idea, building on Curb's existing kind of IP, is repurposing what usually would be a loading bay for delivery freight vehicles, your Amazons, your DPDs, your smaller deliveries, but starting to think about how we could repurpose that system and that thinking and that principle for construction freight vehicles, so that we could stagger their approach to the site and help the site manager or whoever's on site, the logistics operator, better manage their approach to the site. So where did we start? And this is something I think which is quite important in the process. And as I mentioned, I spoke a lot about framing, and really that's what the explore phase is really about for us and the team. One thing I would like to call out and champion is our product owner, Izzy. She's the product owner for the solution we're creating. She was engaged with research from the beginning, and not just as a fly on the wall, you know, just attending meetings as product owner and listening. She did a great job of getting you know, hands-on with us, doing a lot of the analysis with us, doing a lot of the framing with us. And I think that gave us a really a good consensus at the end of this phase, and continuing it throughout. But some of the main outputs from the explore phase were a brief, you know, articulating the challenge in a, you know, series of paragraphs for us internally at first to get our heads around the challenge. Design thinking, design outputs are sometimes hard to grasp for people that are not trained in them or understand reading them. It might just look like an icon, might just look like a picture. So we created a brief and a few versions of that brief that we could share with leadership in the business and our external partners to really, you know, define that challenge. Then what we did was identify some themes. Now, there's always a debate around research and when doing research is, you know, do you let themes emerge or do you create your own themes? And I think what we did was we were really fortunate that we had industry experts and experts from the local authority that we could go and speak to help guide that initial framing. And then what we did so we kind of went down, had an interview, an informal conversation with them both. We then transcribed that, had a little look at kind of what some of the key talking points were. We looked at industry trends and what was coming out. And we came up with 3 themes. And for each of those themes, what we then did was unpick who we might need to speak to get more information about it. And that was really useful for us because, as I said, working in this project, we have to please local authority, we have to please industry, but within industry, there's a whole subset of users and different user types that we'd have to be considerate of when designing this platform. So 2 of the main outputs that we got from the kind of the explore phase were the dynamic stakeholder map, which you can see on the left, which is very, very simply just a good way of articulating what stakeholders are involved and where do they live and where do they kind of belong. And I like to use either a triple helix or a quadruple helix. So the triple helix is industry, society, and government. And if you're using a quadruple helix, you add in academia. So that's for if you're doing projects that involve, you know, universities or other type of institutions. In this case, we weren't. So we really focus heavily on the industry and the government and identifying the key stakeholders we wanted to speak to. And also in the middle of the stakeholder map is the challenge that we articulated. Excuse me. And what that was really important for doing was just being concise about not the project, but the inquiry of the research we were about to undertake. And And then, yeah, one of the main outputs with Innovate UK projects, you have to present to them every quarter about what you're doing. And credit to Reagan here, who's our UX UI designer. We'd created a lean canvas, which is often, on the wall, post-it notes everywhere. And I challenged him with, can we present it a little bit more engagingly, interactively? So what we did was we went and created this kind of click-through, interactive, almost like set of cards that we shared then with the stakeholders, so people could understand how we were viewing the problem, the solution, what made us unique, what we thought our unfair advantage was in comparison to competitors, key metrics, what were we really looking to measure, how could we measure success, the channels, how are we going to get this out there and make people aware and get it into the hands of people that are going to use it, but also into the hands of customers. And then starting to unpick how it could be costed, or what the costs associated to the service would be and the product would be, and then how we would intend to make revenue. And then at the end of the explore phase, really what, as I mentioned, it was to set up our research phase. And we were very fortunate that during this, because of how Innovate UK projects work and because we bid for them, and we could put in a large chunk of time for us to conduct this research. So that it was always in the plan. So I think one thing a lot of organizations are almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Skeptical when it comes to research, because they think it takes loads of time. We were really fortunate that we could block out that time. But I think, being very upfront about the requirements of research in project planning is super important. And I'm very fortunate that I've got a team around me that also believe that too. But yeah, research phase. So once we'd got this framing, once we'd understood these kind of key themes we wanted to understand, really then it was about expanding upon that and really trying to understand, for me, three main things. The situation, so what's the context this challenge is operating in? Who's there? Who's involved? What are the reasons? What are the motivations for that change? What is the desired change? What is the desired future? What are we trying to get to? Who are we trying to improve this for? And then persona. So as I said, who are we trying to help, and who has a stake in the service, in the product, in the challenge? What is their role? What are their priorities? What are their kind of day-to-day experiences? Which then leads quite nicely to action. What are the tasks they have to complete? What are the jobs to be done? Is a framework that you can use and adopt. What are the restrictions they have to play within? What is currently causing any friction or any challenges? And then identifying any obstacles in their current experience and how we might alleviate that. So yeah, as you can see, there's a picture of King's Cross train station. As we said, we were working in Croydon specifically, and we managed, through A to H and Glenn, we managed to recruit a great number of participants for a series of workshops. So yeah, for about 6 weeks, I think it was probably this time last year, actually, around this time last year, there was about 6 weeks where I think I felt more at home in King's Cross train station than I did in my own abode. And obviously this led to, and it was great because I think we were very aware of some of the challenges we were going to face in trying to introduce new ideas and new concepts to this audience. As we said, construction is notoriously slow to adopt new innovations, and usually it only happens when it's mandated or comes from kind of the top down. So we held a series of 4 workshops in total. The first 2 were very much about discovery. We wanted to understand the different people in the room, their roles, their responsibilities, the challenges that they had within the existing kind of scenario. And then the second session, the second 2 sessions were more about designing for new scenarios, or unpicking current scenarios and seeing how we can expand upon them, see where our product may be able to add value. We did this by employing service design tools, journey mapping, user journey creation, scenario creation, And what was really amazing actually was the engagement we got. There was, we were very tentative before going into these rooms around the kind of engagement we get. But I think credit to myself, Reagan, and Izzy who co-facilitated during these workshops. We built a nice working rapport with the participants, and that's led on to some kind of conversations after the workshops, which is a real sign of success, that we built some meaningful relationships. So once we'd had all the workshops and we kind of collected all the data, what I call process and play. So within our studio in Newcastle, we set all the data up on the walls. We began to analyze it, theme it in response to our initial themes, and also challenge those initial themes. We wanted to make sure that we weren't being blinded by our own bias in terms of looking for validation on what we'd identified previously. We were willing to be open, to be challenged, and to edit and adapt some of the themes and the language we use to describe them to reflect the users. We created a set of personas, which, if you're not sure what they are, they're a tool that just helps you understand the breadth of users and stakeholders. And what that allowed us to do was actually prioritize, I think it was about 6 or 8 users or stakeholders that we, within the context of this project and within this this product development, that we could really speak to. And that helped guide kind of Izzy's thinking and Reagan's thinking when we moved on to the next phase, which is prototyping. Now, as I said, next phase, we did sketch as we went as well. So, one thing I think I like to call out is that you don't have to wait until research is finished to start designing. Just be mindful as, new research comes in and new insight is kind of uncovered. How can you respond to that? And having rituals and space and an understanding and a culture within your product development team, that means, we're going to be comfortable with incomplete data sets, but when they kind of fill out, we're going to edit the designs, we're going to have conversations, we're going to see how it realigns. And yeah, the prototyping stage is, like I said, it's one of the more fun stages. It's where we begin to unpick the scenarios we'd identified in the previous phase and really flip them and turn them into, almost play a game of how can we, or what if we, and using our digital products and the things we've got at our disposal to improve this service. Just here, one thing I do advise is don't let your lead designer disappear for 3 weeks to Hong Kong during critical time. It made for some pretty hectic work, but we got it done. And sorry, Reagan, I had to, I'm still sour over that one. But yeah, Reagan did a fantastic job of turning kind of my service design sketches and wireframes, and then we collaborated, as you can see, on the sketch wireframes, and then obviously Reagan then took it into digital prototyping. The define phase really comes off the back of this as well. But actually what we did before we were really clear on, saying this is what it is we went down to London again, went down to Croydon. And on the picture on the left, you can see where they're just talking through some of the ideas we've got, some of the, the app is on screen, on the TV in the background. And what was really great about that day, actually, and one thing I love about prototyping, and it's something and live prototyping and engaging with users, is that we were in his natural environment, Dan's natural environment, the site manager. He said to us, he was like, oh yeah, I'd love this kind of on a TV screen. So he was like, right, let's throw it up there. And by the end of the session, Dan began to interact with it and demonstrate his ideas and thoughts about how it could be used very practically, so it wasn't just that I want this, it was, oh no, he could really understand within the context of the environment, of his day job, how this might be useful. And that, gave us some good insight and good things to consider. So then once we finished this phase, we it's up to Izzy, our product owner in this case, to define the product and work with all the research we've done to do that. And then what that leads to is alpha, which is, the ones and zeros, as we call it, which is, we hand ownership of the project and product, even though we never really own it, to Izzy to manage, working with the development team. And actually, one thing we've done during this project, which was kind of the first time for us at Grid, was embed a designer in that development phase, rather than just having a designer come back and forth for critiques and stuff like that. Reagan has been joining their stand-ups, Free Amigos, backlog refinement, retros. You know, he's part of that team now. So that's great. And you can see there, Reagan working with Neil, one of our software engineers, on just some of the designs. And yeah, Alpha really is around testing. Now, obviously, COVID threw a couple of spanners into the works in terms of timings around, you know, what we ideally would have trialed by now. But we're literally at the stage sooner, well, within the next few weeks, hopefully, that we'll be deploying the software that we've come up with. But in the meantime, as I said, the team has done a great job of engaging with the site, engaging with the users and unpicking that. The pictures on the right show our technology director, Dan Pudwell. If you're in the audience, give us a wave, Dan. And he's speaking later. Working and observing, you know, the app in its environment and trying to understand where some of the errors, some of the challenges may be. And there you can see one of the site marshals at the front gate using the application as well. So yeah, that's where we're at with the alpha. And as I said, the next steps really are for us to begin to unpick the app in context of its use. The next real challenge is embedding research, live research into the team. Something I'm looking really forward to, actually, because, you know, I get to work very closely with Izzy, with Reagan and the development team on this to make sure, you know, we're answering the right questions they need to build the right product for our users. So I guess what have I learned? An awful lot, firstly. But this was something which I became aware of when I was studying design. And that's, with these complex challenges, they're not just complex because of the factors, they're complex because of the scale and of the factors. So you can have a series of factors at a macro level, you know, big political factors, economic factors, but you can also have very practical micro factors around the technology, the people, you know, the tasks that they have to create, the environment in which the app is going to be placed. And be mindful and able to zoom in and zoom out when necessary is really important. And it's not an easy thing. Luckily, as we said, we've got the framework we've put together and the research we've done that allows us to look at the situation on a more macro level and the actions at a kind of more micro level. Just enough research. I was a former academic, and firstly, academic research is far less fun than design research. But also, as I mentioned previously, design research is really about doing enough to progress what you have, the information you have and the amount of detail you have to a point you can make a decision so that you can go and build something, design something, or test something. It's not rigorous academic peer-reviewed research, as much as I'd love to spend all my day doing that. And doing research. It's about ensuring we as a design team can understand the audience, understand the challenge, and communicate that to designers and developers and whoever else we're working with. Everyone's banging on about it around cross-functional teams, but you know, I was at a conference last year and we heard from Strava, from Deliveroo, from N26, and they were all talking about cross-functional teams and how, you know, embedding design and research into product teams is great. And we're starting to see the benefits of, well, we've seen the benefits of that so far, and we're continuing to do so. So that's something we're mindful of. And also we're hoping to do not just within product development, but within brand, within communications, within, you know, what wider aspects of the business. But fundamentally, really what design within the context of Grid for me is really about is research. You know, we go and investigate the problems and do just enough research to create, and we create concepts and ideas for both products, but also business development. Connect. You know, Reagan said something not too long ago well, quite a while ago now, probably, you know, design is the central nervous system. You know, and seeing how design can be that conduit for information and facilitate change or development within the organization. So that's really what I think design's useful for. But since I've last been at Build It Right, design at Grid has grown. So it's actually really exciting time for us. We've got Jonathan, Lindsley, and Rachel. Jonathan's our a communications designer, and Rachel is a 3D designer. So what's really interesting is seeing how we can take the lessons we've learned from this project and apply them in other streams of work that we're doing. And already Jonathan has started to hit the ground running and started to generate some really nice visual content for our social media. And as we say, starting to have impact on other facets of the business. I'd love to share Rachel's work, but it's IP sensitive, so sorry, I can't do that. And yeah, as I said, you know, at Grid, we're encouraged to go and speak out and to go and do speak at conferences. So yeah, I was at Build It Right last year, this year, but also we're encouraged to go and seek out conferences to attend and learn more. There we were in Barcelona, and we do a lot of programs and accelerators with like TFL, HS2. So it's a really exciting time for the company at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of the talk. Thank you very much for listening. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you have any. And yeah, just yeah, fire away in the comments section. And if you want to catch up with me afterwards, I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, the floor is open. Oh, Dylan, that's a great question. How have we found replicating the research flow? It's challenging. I think actually that's one of the biggest things of what's next. During the live trial, obviously it's not going to be maybe safe for us to travel. You know, we might not be allowed to travel, or it might not be economic for us to travel. So I think we're really looking at existing tools like Miro, like Zoom, and just really focusing on what small scale stuff we can do virtually to get the answers we need, but then also looking at the product in context and in use is going to deliver a lot as well. So, you know, something we're very aware of, and actually the project I've been doing with Rachel, inherently we started to use these digital tools more. So I think we as a design team are becoming more comfortable with using them, and then that will inevitably, you know, stretch on and pass on to how we do the work with external people as well. Any more for any more? I'm going to take that. Oh, well done, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Ema. Hashtag Team Nebula. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. As I said, I'm more than happy to catch up with people on social media if you need me. So yeah, enjoy the rest of Build It Right.